So we'll continue with Chapter 8 on medical communications and documentation by looking at written communications. So we'll think about what's part of a handoff report and what information it contains. And we'll also talk about what field care notes are and the parts of an incident report form as well. Key terms to pay attention are just the difference between the incident report form and the patient care report and how those can be found in open and closed forms. So for written communication, we've got these two key pieces, field care notes and patient care reports, and usually they become part of a patient's permanent medical record. We can use those when we hand off a patient to an EMT or paramedic, and internally, they're really going to assist the ski area with risk management. They will be medical and legal records that can be referenced even up to years after an injury should someone need to follow through from risk management or a legal standpoint. Therefore, learning to properly document is super important. Remember, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So a field care note is that kind of on-the-fly, on-scene information that we have. Some field care notes may be done in just a simple notebook, or Write in the Rain actually makes an EMS-specific one, but we'll have key information about the incident, such as the person's name, what we find during primary assessment and their level of consciousness, say A&O times 4. We might have some information about patient history. We also may just record some contact information along with vital signs over time, especially if serial vitals are taken. Now, field care note could even be simpler than that by just a strip of tape that you tear off from your vest and put it onto the patient's jacket and record serial vitals with time using a Sharpie in your pocket. Now later on, an incident report form, such as we see the NSAA one here, contains everything that you need to know about an incident. Refer to this in your book, but essentially we see up top the location where it happened and the difficulty of the trail. We might have some information about the skier's background, what they were skiing or riding, and their ability. It's really important to get a description in the patient's own words, especially for risk management. Notice here we talk about a probable injury. We don't have X-ray vision, so it's just a simple way to record assessment findings. And then the first aid that you rendered, not just on the hill, but in the treatment room after transport. All of those pieces are going to kind of address everything, and we also see some of these other pieces, like the names of other patrollers who helped and what they did to assist, and witness information. Now, patient care report is kind of one level beyond. Frankly, I've never seen them used that often beyond an incident report, but they're very specific to the medical care provided to a patient as a follow-up. Some PCR reports will be a closed form, and that closed form is that kind of series of check boxes similar to that NSAA form that we saw for an incident management one. Ambulance carriers, EMS, may have a closed format PCR form. An open format PCR is very narrative, and so we have a couple of mnemonic devices that help with that. SOAP stands for Subjective, Objective, Assessment, and Plan. Subjectively, what did the patient tell you? Objectively, what were the signs that you recorded and so on? What was your assessment and what treatment did you render? They may take more time to complete because of their open format. Here's that acronym SOAP broken down a little bit more. Anything that the patient describes, remember, is going to be subjective. Anything that you find that is observable, especially numbers such as vital signs, become very objective. Then the assessment is the general impression of the medical problem. You might say, I believe it's an injury to the left knee, and then plan the treatment that's planned. You may apply a quick splint and transfer to a cardboard splint and advise follow-up medical care with doctor or an orthopedic person. Another useful acronym is the cheated one, but this includes everything. It's a little bit more complete. The management of the patient's particular injury, but it very much follows what we learned in Chapter 7 in terms of assessment. You get a chief complaint during that part of scene size up and primary assessment. You take a complete medical history, such as a sample history. You record your head-to-toe findings in secondary assessment. You record the treatment that you provide, and then you pay attention to the disposition of the patient finally. Did they walk out under their own power? Were they sent in an ambulance, etc., in terms of that final outcome for the patient? Now, a mixed format PCR kind of highlights both. We see a few check boxes here, a few opportunities for fill in the blank. Maybe that's where you record the patient's sample history and so on. So we get this mixed format as well. Nearly all PCRs have a section for serial vital signs if needed. And the key ones that we take on the Hill are going to be pulse and respirations. We may take oxygen saturation with a pulse ox or blood pressure when they arrive in the first aid room, and level of consciousness is part of our primary assessment as well. In summary, remember, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. We always want to document the medical facts that are associated with the incident, including ourselves as lead patroller and other patrollers that help. We'll get a statement from the patient in their own words about what happened, and then anything else that may help manage the incident from a recording standpoint, such as photographs or diagrams. Why? Because that incident report form or patient care form is going to be a medical and legal document.